Vincent Kompany to Bayern Munich. Alright, this wasn't the news I was expecting to wake up to today, but here we are. It's all happened really quite quickly. We're going to be discussing it in today's video, the implications for Burnley heading into next season, why Bayern Munich are going after a coach like Kompany. I think it's all fascinating from the outside looking in. General fans of the Championship, I'd love to get your take on this story down below, and Burnley fans in particular would really like to hear from you and how you think this affects things heading into next season. Now, it's fair to say that this season has been a disaster for Burnley, but seemingly not Kompany, despite the relegation and how pitiful Burnley were at times of this Premier League campaign. It's quite interesting that Kompany's reputation has remained fairly untainted despite the poor season he's just had. Now, let's not rewrite history. The last season in the Championship, Burnley were absolutely fantastic. I've been reporting on the Championship for a long time, and Burnley were one of the best sides I've ever seen at this level in terms of their dominance, style of play, how slick they were. They accumulated over 100 points, only lost 3 games all season, and were by far and away one of the most entertaining sides to watch in the EFL. At the start of this season, there was a whole lot of hype around them, quite a lot of money spent on that squad in the summer as well, and I, like a lot of people, thought that that squad would be quite transferable to the Premier League. Prior to this season, I don't think we'd ever seen a side accumulate over 100 points in the Championship and then instantly be relegated in their first season in the Premier League. But that's what's happened to Burnley this season, and I think Clarets fans have seen quite a few red flags popping up with Kompany this season. But quite crucially, I think the Burnley board always saw this as a long-term project. So even when things were going really bad, and I think most other clubs in Burnley's situation, if you take the context away of who Kompany is, would have made a managerial change at some point of that season, sacked him, and tried to get a new manager bounce from somewhere. Burnley never did that though, and I think that's because they always thought that this was a long-term project with Kompany, and with Kompany dropping back down to the Championship with a similar group of players, they would have been expected to be right up and amongst it next season as one of the favourites to go straight back up. But with Burnley seemingly losing Kompany now, it leaves them in a very precarious position heading into next season, I think. Because I do think it's worth saying that a number of those players that Burnley have been able to attract to the club probably came with the intent to learn and develop from Vincent Kompany. I think there's no denying that he was probably the biggest pull at Burnley in attracting a lot of these players there. So how that potentially might upset the apple cart heading into next season, I think will be really fascinating how these next few weeks and months unfold at Burnley heading into next season when they'll obviously be preparing for the Championship. Now, I must admit, I am surprised that Bayern Munich have gone in for Kompany. It is worth stressing that they have been rejected by a number of high-profile managers up until this point, and we're pretty much at choice 10 now for Bayern Munich or something like that, but they have landed on Kompany. You can see a bit of logic in it, whereby when Kompany had the best squad in the Championship last season, Burnley absolutely steamrolled it. Really slick style of play, something that with a very good group of players like Bayern Munich clearly have, I think that tactical plan would be quite transferable actually. But the red flags that popped up in the Premier League this season, I would have thought would have put off most big sides. I'm talking about potentially some red flags popping up with his man management skills and that lack of flexibility at times, which I think has been a real Achilles heel for Burnley all season. Surely a big club like Bayern Munich will be taking that into consideration when making such a big jump here. When compared to a lot of other bosses, Kompany is still very young for the job, only 38 years old. If you look at his record in management so far, he's taken charge of just shy of 200 matches and has a win rate of just over 43% in that time. His win rate taking an absolute battering this season in the Premier League with Burnley. I can't help but feel like this Bayern Munich job has come a year or 3 maybe too early for Kompany. From his perspective, you can't really blame him though for jumping ship at this time. For whatever reason, his stock hasn't really taken that much of a hit this season, and when a big club like Bayern does come in, you've got to make that jump, haven't you, moving from Burnley? But how much time Bayern would be willing to afford him, especially if next season doesn't start well, I'm not so sure. But in terms of how this affects Burnley going into next season as well, I think this could have quite the ripple effect. Now, as of recording, Burnley are the most fancied side for promotion in the Championship next season, with promotion odds of 2-1 as of recording, but I can't help but feel like opinions on Burnley will sway quite a bit with Kompany no longer in the managerial dugout. For the Championship, they do still have a really good, solid group of players that are more than capable of challenging in and around the top end of the Championship. But Kompany, it felt like at least last season, was that bit of an X factor which gave Burnley a real edge. And where they go from here in terms of an ex-boss is anyone's guess at the moment, I suppose. My overall thoughts on this at the moment are, on one hand, I do rate Kompany and still think he's a good managerial prospect for the future. I think we saw enough promise in that promotion season with Burnley where we saw the tactical nous, what Kompany's able to do when he's got a very talented group of players. But last season in the Premier League, that lack of adaptability, the bad man management, and let's face it, bad decisions in terms of players he chose to drop from that Championship winning side into the Premier League, and that lack of maybe accountability at times on those decisions as well, are things that have popped up as real red flags for me, and something that could haunt Kompany when he does move up the managerial ladder if he's not learnt from those mistakes this season. Is it fair to say something like the idea of Vincent Kompany maybe is a little bit better than the actual manager of Vincent Kompany at this point in time? And that's not to say he can't reach an elite level of management, because I certainly think he's got that in his locker. But at such a young age and coming off the back of such a poor season with Burnley, where I know they had a little bit of a flurry at the end where it looked like they may have sneaked out of it, but let's face it, for the vast majority of the season, Burnley were wrote off by everyone, weren't they? They were that bad. I do think it's a shame that it looks like we won't get that character in Kompany back in the Championship next season, because I do think he was great value the last time he was here. But where Burnley go from here, I think will be very interesting indeed. I suppose one of the silver linings that Burnley fans can point towards in this whole scenario is how much cash they're actually going to bank for Kompany, because of the compensation fee that Bayern Munich will have to pay and everything like that. So that's a bit of a silver lining, and even with Kompany leaving, I think Burnley are still in a very strong position to bounce back up to the Premier League, especially if they do get that next managerial appointment spot on. I know that the season in the Premier League was a disaster, but for the Championship, there's so much talent in that squad, as we saw last season. Whether or not that all falls into place, though, we'll have to wait and see. Like I say though, guys, I would welcome your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. Very interested to see where Burnley fans in particular are feeling right now. Other than that though, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like, and I'll see you all in the next one.